Welcome everybody to PyData Carolinas. I have a lot of connections to the PyData conferences, both as my role as a director of the Python Software Foundation, but also my everyday job is working on Project Jupyter, and it is so cool for me to see the great things that people are doing with Jupyter and the ecosystem. First, I want to thank the organizers, all of the volunteers. I had a blast yesterday getting to meet people and the folks I talked to, how nice they were, how organized things were, and it really is a credit to the community that you have here. And in many ways, it is like the community that we have in San Diego. We have a fairly academic community, but then we also have some good influx of business, and we basically got a lot of people that care about sharing their knowledge and making things better. I want to thank the sponsors, and the sponsors are critical, not just in putting off this conference and IBM giving us this lovely venue to use today. The sponsors are somebody that make your community better over time. As an organizer of community groups, just finding space sometimes is a huge challenge. So, you know, to have sponsors that are willing to share space to support your groups is really wonderful. And I really think we should give it up for everybody and all the people that traveled here and all of you for being here, because you are what makes this conference what it is. So I would say give yourselves all a great round of applause. This is my favorite data visualization. I've been using it for, well, probably close to 30 years. There was a study that was done about financial data and how to make it understandable by people. And ironically, unhappy face, face, and happy face was the best way to communicate that to people. And hopefully, if you're feeling unhappy face now, maybe by the end you'll have the happy face, and certainly by the end of the day today, I think you will be inspired and have some things that you can go back and do. So a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to do a brief illustrated introduction to mentoring, tell a little story that sort of connects back to the triangle for me, and shares a lot of how I feel about mentoring. We're going to talk about why mentoring matters, not just on a qualitative sense, but also on a quantitative sense, and what it matters to you personally and why it can matter to you as a community member. It sounds really simple to be a mentor, and in a lot of ways it is. But a lot of times I run into people and they're like, well, I don't know how to mentor. And so what we're going to do is talk about 5 things that help people become mentors in a way that they feel comfortable. And then at the end, I have a question. So, are we still good with video if I'm down here? Okay, cool. So encourage others to imagine the possible. Encourage others to manage the possible. Imagine the possible. Margaret Daniels Tyler wrote this, and she will come back in this presentation, but it is a powerful quote to me. And someday, each of you will fly. And some of you sooner than others, right? Now, if I was the baby bird in the nest, I might say, it's impossible. There is no way I can fly. Gravity, I'll be splat on the bottom of the ground before I fly. Well, we in the Python community know that if we look at Lorena Barba's notebook on aerodynamics and share that with the baby birds, you will find out that yes, you in fact can have lift. The aerodynamics are such that you can fly, and maybe just give it a try. So somebody encouraging you to do something. So as a mentor, you have the power to change somebody's life in some way, big or small. Now, being a mentor transforms you into a leader, into someone who can impact not just one person, but many people. And the baby bird went on with a little encouragement and a little feeling that things were possible to have his own little baby bird flight school. So again, encourage others to imagine the possible. So we're going to transition a little bit to a story. And the story begins today here at PyData Carolinas doing a keynote. Something I never thought that I would do. I did a keynote earlier this year and in the Philippines, and it was really a phenomenal thing to do from the standpoint of seeing how they used open source and seeing how Jupyter Notebooks were being used in ways that I hadn't even anticipated yet. So, but to really tell this story, we need to kind of take the Wayback Machine and go back, about 39 years. I'm 50. I love technology. It totally rocks my world, but not for technology's sake, for what it can do for people. And so I'm an 11-year-old girl. I grew up with privilege. I grew up in the shadow of Bell Labs. For those of you that have never heard of Bell Labs, think of it as IBM for telecommunications 30 years ago. They had a really phenomenal research center making semiconductor stuff, doing optics research, fiber optics. They also had really cool mainframes. And people very similar to you that went out into the local community and taught 11-year-olds how to program on a mainframe. And I was really lucky to be one of those students at the time. And that transitioned me into the next year. I was in a pull-out gifted program, which as a 12-year-old girl really wasn't, you want to fit in, you don't want to seem different, you don't want to, the social thing going on. And I get into this classroom, which I had to spend about a third of my day every day with, and it was me and 3 guys. And the teacher said, well, what would you like to do? We're playing Dungeons and Dragons. Don't you want to do this? And I'm thinking, no, I really don't. I want to go back to my regular class where people are doing art and photography and things like that. And nothing against Dungeons and Dragons, because I have played it, and I think it's a pretty cool game, actually. But as a 12-year-old, I did not. And so the teacher says to me, well, you have to pick 2 things that you're going to study for the next 4 months, really intensively. And in the corner of the room, in a box, was an Apple II computer. Hadn't been put together yet. And I'm thinking, can I try that? And she looked at me and she's like, well, it's not set up, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'll set it up. Not knowing how to set it up or even, but hey, I'm going to try it. And then the other thing I decided to do, maybe this is telling, I was a college-level psychology class. So we got that right brain, left brain thing going on. So this Apple II was phenomenal. You can see by the graphics that The resolution, gaming was still really big back then. Atari had just come out with Breakout, and I had ported, took me probably 3 months, but I ported the Atari Breakout game to the Apple II. And it was an exercise in exploration, creativity, problem solving, because unlike today, we did not have the internet. We did not have tutorials on every subject at our fingertips. In fact, documentation for most computers was fairly sparse. But it was sort of like you're an explorer persevering, and I loved puzzles. So it was a puzzle to me. So I'm growing up with privilege. I wind up graduating high school in 3 years. And then my story leads me to a little place down the road, to Durham. And I started a program at Duke in electrical engineering. At the time, there was maybe a couple dozen women in the engineering school of like 190 or so students. So you start distributing around those couple dozen across 4 majors. Fewer still women, but it was something that totally rocked my world. And I went through Duke and, finally made it to be a senior. And the data points told this story. I was a really strong student. I'd already been taking graduate level classes in electrical engineering. I was in the top 10% of the class. I had done independent research at Duke Medical Center on use of optics and monitoring radiation exposure for in the early days with AIDS patients. I had also, and this is the connection I kind of have with Chris, I ran Duke's cable television station for 2 years and had Duke's, it was all volunteer run, broadcast out into the hospital 24/7. I won't say that it was quality programming, but it was what it was. But it did go to the hospital, so it kind of kept it fairly tame. And as a result of that, I had Duke's Presidential Student Leadership Scholarship for 2 years. And in my spare time, between studying and running the TV station, I worked with a startup that was the first startup to make video yearbooks. And you think about it now, and on your phone you could like Snapchat whatever video yearbook together. Back then it was different. You had like the portable beta cam that was probably weighed 10 pounds or so. But all of this kind of led to like what would be an expected outcome from the data. I'm a senior. I'm going to interview for PhD programs in electrical engineering. Makes sense, right? I'm going to graduate with honors. I'm going to excel in digital communications research, except for I'm in the basement of Carnegie Mellon's engineering building, and I'm sitting on the floor in the middle of a panic attack. And that panic attack, I'm hearing these words in my head: broken, isolated, stupid, failure. And again and again and again. So my data and my perception of the data was broken, isolated, stupid, failure. So how could all these other folks see me as somebody who is competent, successful, somebody that they might want in their engineering program, while I felt like I was a fraud hey, didn't they see the B I got in microprocessors, the graduate class, like earlier in the year? What if I completely messed something up? Well, okay. I was worried they would find me out as a fraud, but even more worried that they would accept me and I would be working down in a basement by myself, long hours, with nobody who was a peer of mine. Now, repeat this in about 6 other universities, sitting on the floor, having a panic attack, thinking that I was a failure. So despite all the privilege, despite all the efforts that had been done over time, panic, and later I found out post-traumatic stress, was a reality in my life. The privilege that seemed so nice and idyllic as a child perhaps wasn't really like that underneath. And the mentors that crossed my life had a huge impact. Many didn't know, but they did. And so we go back to the end of my senior year, and I get a phone call from Margaret Daniels Tyler. Remember, encourage people to imagine what's possible. And she is, at the time, a director of admissions for MIT's Sloan School of Management. And she asked me if I want to come in because she's going to be on campus and have a chat with her. And I was like, okay, but you realize I'm an electrical engineer and really that's what I should be doing. She's like, I know, but why don't you come and we can talk about it. Okay. So I finally agree. She was very persuasive. And one of the first questions she asks me is, why do you want to get a PhD in electrical engineering? And with the uncreative response that I had, well, it seemed like that was the expected thing for me to do based on the data and the projections that came out of that data. Well, if you could craft your own PhD, what would you learn and create? You've got all these varied experiences at Duke that are a part of you. What would rock your world? And I said, well, it'd be really cool to take some of the computer stuff and the networking stuff and make it so we could share information and educational resources with people in different places that might not have access to it. So, high school students that maybe were very proficient in math, but their high school didn't offer calculus. Give them an opportunity to have access to that information. And then she asked me, well, why would you do that? And I said, well, because education opens doors. And she looked at me and she said, do you realize that at MIT, you can combine your electrical engineering with management study and actually try and create that? And okay, the thing about Margaret Daniels Tyler at the time, she was the first Black woman to be an admissions director at any Ivy League level school. She had a presence, a confidence that she just exuded. And I just sat there and I was like, I don't know why I'm not doing this. And so I decided to apply to the Sloan School at her encouragement. She was there. She coached me through how to write the application, how to present my achievements. Because remember, deep down inside, I was still that broken, isolated, stupid failure. So it would be very hard for me to share that. And what was great is not only did she do that during the application process, but she stayed around while I was a student there, while I was doing my master's research. And one day I came to her and I was like, I don't know whether to apply for this scholarship. I had half a merit scholarship, but I was self-funding my tuition. So there was another opportunity through Digital Equipment Corporation. Who remembers Digital Equipment Corporation? Okay, they were a competitor of IBM's way back when that no longer exist. Their computers still exist in some research labs out there. You could still find DECVAXs and other mini computers. They were actually used a lot in scientific research, but that doesn't really matter. So they were offering, Digital Equipment was offering 2 merit scholarships to women in management at MIT. And at the time, 18% or 33 of the 181 students at MIT were women. 4% were under the age of 23. I was 21. All of my classmates were like, you don't have a chance. You've never worked. You've never, you don't have the experience, blah, 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 blah. Well, okay, filtering it with the broken, isolated, stupid failure filter, I was like, okay, I don't know that I should apply for this. I mean, it seems sort of, and her simple question was, why not? What do you have to lose? And I was like, an entire weekend of writing applications for this thing. And she's like, yeah, but what do you have to potentially gain? And I was like, well, the fact that I could eat and have a winter coat in Boston later that year because I had enough money to pay rent and groceries and stuff. So it was kind of a motivating factor. And so I went ahead and I applied. And ironically, I did get that scholarship. And I owe much of what has transpired since then to the time that Margaret spent with me and the encouragement she gave to me and her helping me see what was possible. So Margaret went on to leave MIT after being a dean of the graduate school. She went on to be a vice president of the United Negro College Fund. She also ran the strategic direction for a little $2 billion Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Millennial Scholars Program. She was a phenomenal, and still is, a phenomenal person. But the thing that she did so well was mentor people that she felt had a strength of character and would work hard to get what they wanted and work for others. So why does mentoring matter in our communities? I'm actually going to grab some water. Think about that for a second. How many of you have actually been mentored by somebody at some point in your career or academic life? How many have been a mentor? Okay, so we could have more mentors. Why would you want to? Well, mentoring matters because great leaders inspire future leaders. And by you sharing your knowledge in whatever space it is, whether it's research or DevOps, and great talk, Kyle. That's somebody you'd want to work for if you were a DevOps engineer. And the impact of mentoring has an unusual impact on diversity and inclusion. Harvard Business Review did some studies earlier this summer, And the title was Diversity. Most programs don't work. Here's what to do about it. Well, that's pretty exciting as we try and figure out how to make our communities more diverse and more inclusive. Mentoring was one of the few things that did work and worked quite well. Like, there was a research study within that showed that Hispanic men, Asian men, Black women, Hispanic women, and Asian women had between a 9% and 24% increase in advancement, pay, when they had some sort of mentorship. And those are pretty powerful numbers. And so think of yourself as that person there, maybe mentoring one or two people, and those one or two people go out and mentor one or two people as well. And mentoring, unlike a lot of diversity programs, has a multiplier effect. It has the ability to exponentially change our communities. Well, okay, that's all well and good, but what's in it for me? We have people across all different dynamics in a spectrum. We have somebody who was like me, who had very little self-confidence, to somebody who's very cocky, who knows everything, and really doesn't need to listen to anybody else. Well, both of those people and everybody in between need mentoring to some degree. Perhaps the cocky, I can do it all student needs to realize that maybe there's other people on the project that they would like to work with, that maybe could share and collaborate with them. And really, what that gives us is an inclusive community to solve real-world problems. One of the things that drew me to Jupiter was the impact that the notebooks could have on people collaborating in order to solve real-world problems. As an example, folks in the Philippines, tuberculosis is an issue over there, and getting folks that have acquired tuberculosis to finish a drug regimen, and the drug regimen's not that expensive, but it's prohibitive enough that over the course of time, people drop the regimen, because I think it takes about 6 months. I could be wrong. So the notebooks enabled government officials, economists, biologists, statisticians, doctors, to come together and have sort of a common language, if you will. It reduced some of the jargon of each individual problem space, because you could visualize some of the data later on. And then at the same time, it gave people a sort of a ramp up the learning curve about the other disciplines so that they were able to get an idea into process and trial faster. And so when we look at the problems that are really facing us in the world, most of those problems are not going to be solved by one person. That was actually my mom in her later stages of Alzheimer's. And for anybody who's taking care of an elderly parent, there are lots of things to maneuver. Good care, good resources, financial payments for things, the humanity of the person that you are caring for. And those problems are not going to be solved by maybe as much as I would like as one computer software developer. I'm not going to solve that problem. But if I have a diverse community with lots of strengths and different experiences, somebody can solve it. Some group of people can solve it. and think about the problem spaces that you work in. There are likely ways that you can better communicate with research partners, with other groups within your organization. And it matters because the hard problems are the ones that are most worth solving, or at least moving forward on, because it's possible to find a solution. So how do you mentor? I tend to look at mentors as not the big, huge formal, like, I'm going to have this person be my mentor for the next 5 years as I move up the ranks of corporate America. That's great, and that does work as well. But in our busy lives and the different roles that we play, researcher, developer, parent, spouse, daughter, son, little league coach, chess. Somebody I met yesterday, he was teaching chess to elementary schools. It was really cool. And another gentleman had a daughter that was in an outreach program to learn violin in Durham, which I think has been pretty successful. So how do you mentor? Well, bad acronym, I'm sorry, but basically be a slacker is the best way to mentor. So what you can do in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour matters a lot. Because I'll say Margaret didn't spend more than an hour with me at any given point in time. So there's 5 things in this slacker acronym. The first one is show up. Because if you don't show up, nothing is going to happen. So that's step 1, kind of ground zero. So be open to people approaching you. And at a SciPy conference a couple of years ago, maybe 3 now, I said, well, it's just common courtesy. Just say hello to people. And I had a whole room of folks, including my college daughter, laughing at me like, we're developers. We can't do that. And I was like, okay, aim a little higher. You can do this. We all like the same things, at least when it comes to code. The next thing is to listen. You won't know what a person needs unless you listen to them. I'm not going to tell you that I don't have enough money for a winter coat in Boston if you haven't set the stage and listened to me before. You won't know that I need help on installing Jupyter Hub on my cluster in my supercomputer center if you're not listening to me. And along with that is asking questions. And not the kind of questions that sort of sometimes show how much we know, but asking the questions like that are more open-ended. What do you think about that? Why do you think that would be helpful? I don't really know your problem space as well as you do. Are there a few ideas that you think might work? Maybe we could talk about them. And then part of being that slacker is to get off the couch and actually act on something. And the actions can be small, or they can be larger, because let's face it, life is kind of a funny thing. It evolves over time. Sometimes we have time, sometimes we don't. But if you say you're going to do something, try and do it, or own up to the fact that you can't do it and apologize and say, sorry, I thought I could, but I can't. But perhaps so-and-so could help you. That matters. It's for building trust, both individually and trust in a larger space of a community. And then the last part of being a slacker is what slackers really like, which is rest, recharge. It is really important to take care of yourself. And it's something that we don't always do well as developers. We want to stay up all night coding on the really cool thing. We want to contribute to all these different open source projects. But if we aren't taking care of ourselves, we're liable to get more angry, more short with people, unhealthy. So it is worth recharging. You can't be a good mentor unless you take care of yourself. So, being a slacker, show up, listen, question, act, recharge. And the question I'm going to leave you is, what will you do to encourage others to imagine the possible? Thank you.